Arnott air suspension products, Jaguar installation. Step 1. Disconnecting the battery. To avoid the possibility of short circuits while working with electric components, consult your owner's manual on how to disconnect your battery. Always wear safety glasses when doing automotive maintenance. Removal. Step 2. Wheel removal. Start by removing the wheel's lug nuts. Once the lug nuts are removed, carefully take off the wheel. Removal. Step 3. Disassembling connection to sway bar end link. Start by removing the sway bar end link. Press down on the sway bar end link and push the bolt through. Removal. Step 4. Disassembling connection to upper A-arm. With the proper tools, loosen the top bolt that attaches the upper A-arm to the hub assembly. As the bolt is loosened, the upper A-arm will start to come free. Continue loosening the bolt until it can be finished by hand and stop. Pull down on the upper A-arm to allow room to finish loosening the bolt by hand. While loosening the bolt, hold the upper A-arm in place to avoid it falling forward and causing injury. Carefully lower the hub assembly forward to expose the lower control arm bolt. Removal. Step 5. Disassembling upper shock. Start by disconnecting the electrical connection to the shock. Then proceed to loosen the airline. Air will escape from the airline as it releases from the shock. Remove the 4 bolts from the shock's mounting studs. Removal. Step 6. Removing the lower control arm bolt. Begin to loosen the lower control arm bolt. It may be necessary to push the whole hub assembly towards the front of the car. Press up on the shock and remove the lower shock bolt. Lower the shock to rest on the control arm. Removal. Step 7. Removing the old shock. Pull down on the hub assembly and use the sway bar end link to hold it open. This provides enough room to remove the shock from the wheel well. Grasping the bottom of the shock, first push up and then pull it back over the control arm. Once the shock is free from the top mount, angle the lower part of the shock down while being careful to avoid the brake line. Continue to lower the shock down until it can be pulled forward out of the wheel well. Install. Step 1. Preparing the Arnott shock for installation. Before installing the shock, be sure to remove the 4 top stud bolts. Install. Step 2. Positioning the shock for mounting. Make sure the airline valve is towards the front of the car. Slide the bottom of the shock into the wheel well, back and down, in between the lower control arm and brake line. Now lift to align the top 4 studs with their position in the top mount. Finish off the positioning by pulling down on the hub assembly while lifting the shock up and over to rest on the control arm. Install. Step 3. Mounting the lower control arm bolt. At this point, the shock is prepared to be mounted in place. While pushing up on the shock, align the lower control arm with the shock mount and slide the bolt through. With the bolt now through the control arm, hand tighten it enough to hold the shock in place. The bolt should remain somewhat loose. The hub assembly will now hang in place, ready to be attached to the upper A-arm. Install. Step 4. Mounting the shock to the upper control arm. While pivoting on the lower control arm, push the hub assembly up to align with the upper A-arm ball joint. It may be necessary to pull down on the upper A-arm to line it up with the hub assembly mount. Once in place, hand tighten the upper A-arm bolt so that it is loosely threaded. This can be difficult because of the spring-loaded upper A-arm. A couple threads are all that is needed to temporarily hold things in place. Install. Step 5. Lining up and connecting the sway bar end link. Push down on the sway bar end link to line it back up. When the sway bar end link is lined up to the mount, slide the bolt through from the back. This will hold it in place. Start to tighten the bolt until it is snug. Install. Step 6. Tightening remaining hardware. The final step to the lower installation is to tighten the remaining hardware. Tighten the upper A-arm bolt until it is snug. Finish tightening the lower shock bolt that was left hand tightened from step 4. This should be snug when complete. Install. Step 7. Reassembling upper shock. Reattach the airline hose. Then proceed to tighten the airline fitting. Replace the 4 bolts connecting the top of the shock to the shock mount. Reconnect the electrical connection to the shock. Install. Step 8. Reconnecting the battery. To avoid the possibility of short circuits while working with electric components, consult your owner's manual on how to reconnect your battery. Installation completed. Congratulations! Lower the car to test drive and check the installation.